December 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Snow piled deep, temperatures plummeted to 20 below zero, and the thin metal skins of military vehicles offered little protection against the biting cold. For the German soldiers launching their desperate final offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, the weather was a double-edged sword. It grounded Allied air power, but it also mercilessly attacked their own complex machinery. Engines refused to turn over, lubricants thickened to sludge, and batteries died in the frigid air. Starting a Panzer or even a simple Kubelwagen often involved blowtorches, frantic hand-cranking, and precious minutes wasted while American artillery zeroed in. Yet, amidst this mechanical graveyard, one vehicle seemed almost immune to the cold's icy grip: the American Willys MB, universally known as the Jeep. While German mechanics wrestled with frozen engines, GIs often found their Jeeps sputtering to life with surprising ease. A turn of the key, a push of the starter button, and the reliable Go Devil engine would cough, catch, and settle into its familiar, unrefined idle. This wasn't a miracle, it was a direct result of two fundamentally different engineering philosophies colliding in the harshest possible environment. The simple act of starting an engine, often taken for granted, was becoming a critical, often life-or-death, differentiator on the winter battlefield. German military vehicle design, even for utilitarian vehicles like the Volkswagen Kubelwagen or the Opel Blitz truck, reflected a deep-seated belief in precision engineering and, sometimes, unnecessary complexity. Their electrical systems often featured high-quality but delicate components. Ignition systems, particularly on older designs, might rely on magnetos requiring careful timing or manual spark advance controls. Wiring harnesses were meticulously crafted but could be vulnerable to moisture ingress or vibration damage. The pursuit of optimal performance sometimes came at the cost of field robustness. While often brilliantly engineered for specific conditions, like the Kubelwagen's air-cooled engine's resistance to freezing, the overall system could lack the brute simplicity needed for universal reliability across all environments. Starting a German military vehicle often felt like a technician's task, requiring specific knowledge and careful procedure. The American approach, epitomized by the Jeep, was born from a different world: the ruthless, cost-driven mass production environment of the Detroit automotive industry. The Jeep wasn't designed by military purists seeking the absolute peak of performance. It was designed by engineers who understood that reliability and ease of use were paramount for a vehicle intended to be driven, abused, and maintained by millions of minimally trained soldiers. The requirement wasn't for the best possible ignition system, but for the simplest possible system that would work every single time, whether in the frozen Ardennes, the humid jungles of the Pacific, or the dusty plains of North Africa. The Jeep's electrical and ignition system was almost insultingly basic, deliberately leveraging proven, off-the-shelf components from civilian cars and trucks. It used a standard 6-volt electrical system, considered low power by some military standards, but incredibly robust and easy to troubleshoot. The ignition relied on a simple distributor, coil, and spark plugs familiar to any American auto mechanic. Starting was initiated by a standard automotive key, or, more commonly in military versions, a simple push-button starter engaged after turning the main switch. There were no complex magneto timings to adjust, no manual spark controls to fiddle with, no delicate vacuum lines controlling advance. The wiring harness was designed for durability and ease of repair, using standardized connectors and heavy insulation. It was, in essence, the electrical system of a basic 1930s American car, militarized for durability. To German engineers accustomed to bespoke military designs, this reliance on primitive civilian technology might have seemed laughable, a sign of American corner-cutting. But this simplicity was its genius. It meant the system had fewer potential failure points. It meant replacement parts, distributor caps, coils, spark plugs, were being mass-produced by the millions for the civilian market, ensuring abundant supply. And crucially, it meant that almost any American soldier with rudimentary mechanical knowledge could diagnose and often fix an ignition problem in the field using basic tools. A stalled Jeep was rarely a catastrophic event. It was usually a temporary inconvenience. A stalled German vehicle, however, could often require a specialized mechanic and hours, if not days, of work. This seemingly mundane difference in starting reliability was about to have profound strategic implications, keeping American reconnaissance units moving, artillery spotters mobile, and command structures connected when their German counterparts were literally frozen in place. The core of the Jeep's legendary reliability wasn't a single revolutionary component, but a system built on decades of hard-won experience from the American automotive industry. The engineers at Willys Overland and Ford, competing fiercely for the lucrative military contract, understood that a vehicle designed for global warfare needed an electrical system that was fundamentally overbuilt, standardized, and repairable. They deliberately chose proven, if seemingly unsophisticated, technologies over cutting-edge but potentially fragile innovations. The choice of a 6-volt electrical system was a perfect example. By the late 1930s, some advanced automotive and military designs were already experimenting with higher voltage 12-volt systems, which offered more power for accessories and potentially easier starting in extreme cold due to higher cranking speeds. However, 12-volt systems also required thinner wires, more prone to breakage from vibration, more complex voltage regulators, and components manufactured to tighter tolerances. The 6-volt standard, while less powerful, was the established workhorse of the American auto industry. It used thicker, more robust wiring. Its components, generators, starter motors, coils, were simpler, heavier, and less sensitive to variations in temperature or moisture. Critically, millions of 6-volt parts were already being mass-produced for civilian cars, ensuring an almost infinite supply chain for replacements. The Jeep engineers prioritized absolute dependability and field serviceability over the marginal performance gains of a higher voltage system. They designed for the muddy field in France, not the pristine laboratory in Stuttgart. The ignition system itself was a monument to Detroit's pragmatism. Instead of the complex magnetos favored in some high-performance or aircraft engines, and some German military vehicles, the Jeep used a standard distributor and coil system. The distributor, driven directly by the engine, was a simple mechanical device routing the spark to the correct cylinder. The coil, transforming low voltage to high voltage, was a sealed unit, often identical to those used in millions of Ford or Chevrolet cars. The spark plugs were standard automotive types, easily replaceable with a basic wrench. This entire system was designed with loose tolerances compared to high-performance engines. It wasn't optimized for maximum fuel efficiency or peak horsepower. It was optimized to generate a reliable spark even when slightly worn, dirty, or improperly adjusted. It was designed to forgive neglect and abuse. Contrast this with potential German vulnerabilities. While German engineering produced excellent magnetos, these devices required precise timing and were sensitive to moisture. Some German vehicles utilized complex vacuum advanced systems for spark timing, adding another layer of potential failure points, cracked hoses, diaphragm leaks. Furthermore, the German emphasis on specialized components meant that finding a replacement Bosch distributor cap or a specific Beru spark plug in the chaos of the front lines could be a logistical nightmare. The American system, built on universal automotive standards, meant a Jeep driver stranded anywhere in Allied territory could often cannibalize parts from a civilian car or truck, or find replacements at almost any supply depot. This universal interchangeability was a hidden logistical superpower. The user interface, the act of starting the vehicle, was deliberately simplified to the point of being idiot-proof. Turn the master switch, push the starter button, or turn the key in later models. There were no manual choke controls to flood the engine, no complex throttle settings required for cold starts, no manual spark advance levers to misadjust. The system assumed the operator was cold, tired, stressed, possibly wearing thick gloves, and likely had minimal mechanical training. It was designed to work despite the user, not because of them. German vehicles, reflecting a culture that valued technical proficiency, often demanded more finesse from their drivers, a requirement that could prove fatal under combat conditions. This entire philosophy stemmed directly from the brutal competition of the American car market. Ford, GM, and Chrysler had spent decades learning how to build millions of cars that would reliably start every morning for average consumers who treated their vehicles with indifference. They had mastered the art of mass-producing durable, inexpensive electrical components designed to withstand vibration, temperature swings, and neglect. When tasked with building a military vehicle, they simply applied these hard-earned lessons, choosing robust simplicity over theoretical perfection. The Jeep's reliable start wasn't an accident. It was the direct, deliberate result of industrialized reliability perfected on the streets of America long before the first shot was fired. The strategic value of the Jeep's simple, reliable starting system became brutally apparent, not just in the frozen hell of the Ardennes, but across every theater of war, where environmental conditions became a primary adversary. From the bitter cold of the Aleutian Islands campaign to the sucking mud of the Italian peninsula and the humid, corrosive jungles of the Pacific, the Jeep's ability to start reliably every time provided a critical edge in mobility and operational tempo that German vehicles often lacked. The Battle of the Bulge remains the starkest example. German armored units relying on complex water-cooled engines, like the Maybach HL-230 in the Panther and Tiger, faced a nightmare scenario. Water in the cooling systems froze solid, requiring lengthy and dangerous thawing procedures often involving open fires built precariously close to fuel lines. Diesel fuel, used in some German trucks and support vehicles, gelled in the extreme cold, clogging fuel lines and filters. High-precision ignition systems became brittle and prone to failure. Starting a German tank or truck often involved multiple crew members, hours of effort, specialized cold start fluids, often in short supply, and a significant risk of damaging the engine before it even turned over. This meant German units were often immobilized during the critical early morning hours, precisely when tactical movement was most vital. American units, while certainly not immune to the cold, faced far fewer systemic starting problems with their gasoline-powered fleet, spearheaded by the ubiquitous Jeep. The Jeep's simple L-head Go Devil engine, while less sophisticated than the German power plants, was renowned for its ruggedness. Critically, its standardized 6-volt electrical system, paired with the simple distributor ignition, proved surprisingly resilient in the cold. While batteries certainly lost efficiency, the system's inherent simplicity meant fewer things could go catastrophically wrong. American maintenance doctrine also emphasized readily available winterization kits and standardized procedures for cold weather operation, techniques borrowed directly from decades of civilian experience operating cars in the harsh winters of the American Midwest and Northeast. GIs knew the basic tricks, keeping batteries charged, using appropriate oil grades, and sometimes even draining coolant overnight in extreme conditions, knowledge that was common sense in Detroit but perhaps less ingrained in the Wehrmacht's maintenance culture focused on complex machinery. The result was a crucial difference in operational readiness. While German units might take hours to get their vehicles moving after a frigid night, American reconnaissance patrols and jeeps were often able to start up and move out relatively quickly, gathering vital intelligence or establishing forward observation posts before the enemy was fully mobile. This advantage in start time translated directly into tactical initiative. Beyond the cold, the Jeep's simple start proved equally decisive in mud and water. The standardized waterproofing kits developed for amphibious landings, though simpler than the tank versions, often included basic protection for the distributor and spark plugs. More importantly, the inherent simplicity and robustness of the 6-volt system made it less susceptible to short circuits caused by moisture compared to higher voltage, more complex systems. Jeeps frequently forded streams and churned through mud that would have drowned the electrical systems of more delicate vehicles. If a Jeep's ignition did get wet, the fix was often straightforward. Dry off the distributor cap and wires, a task any driver could perform with a rag. Fixing a complex, water-damaged German electrical system often required a specialist. In the Pacific Theater, humidity and salt corrosion were the primary enemies. Here again, the Jeep's deliberately overbuilt and simple components proved advantageous. Heavy insulation on wiring, robust connectors, and the basic sealed nature of the coil and distributor offered better resistance to the pervasive dampness than more complex systems might have. While corrosion was still a problem, the ease of replacing standardized components meant that a Jeep suffering electrical failure could often be back in service quickly, cannibalizing parts if necessary. The German forces operating in similarly humid environments, where applicable, faced greater challenges maintaining their more complex electrical systems far from established workshops. The simple start wasn't just about convenience, it was about maintaining operational tempo. Every hour a vehicle spent immobile due to a starting failure was an hour it wasn't scouting, transporting commanders, laying communication wire, evacuating wounded, or bringing up vital supplies. The Jeep's ability to reliably start across a staggering range of environmental conditions ensured that the American Army's nervous system, its reconnaissance, command, and communication functions, remained fluid and responsive even when the enemy's was seizing up. German engineers might have scoffed at the lack of sophistication, but the GIs driving the Jeeps knew the value of a machine that simply worked every single time they turned the key. The Jeep's reputation for reliable starting transcended mere convenience. It became a cornerstone of American tactical and operational flexibility, directly impacting the effectiveness of critical battlefield roles that relied on constant mobility. While German units often found their reconnaissance patrols delayed or their command structures paralyzed by stalled vehicles, the ever-dependable Jeep kept the nerves of the American Army firing, even under the most adverse conditions. Consider the vital role of reconnaissance. Scout units, often operating far ahead of the main force or deep in enemy territory, depended absolutely on their vehicles for speed, stealth, and, crucially, a reliable getaway. A Kubelwagen that refused to start after a cold night spent observing enemy movements could mean the capture or death of the entire patrol. German reconnaissance doctrine, while effective, was often hampered by the mechanical temperamentality of their light vehicles, especially in extreme weather. American reconnaissance teams equipped with Jeeps had a higher degree of confidence in their mobility. The simple push-button start meant they could transition from static observation to rapid movement in seconds, allowing them to take greater risks, gather more timely intelligence, and extract themselves from dangerous situations more reliably. The Jeep's simple start wasn't just about engine ignition, it was about information superiority, bought cheap. The impact on command and control was equally profound. Officers from platoon leaders up to generals relied on jeeps for battlefield mobility, allowing them to quickly assess situations, issue orders, and maintain contact with subordinate units. A German staff officer stranded by a malfunctioning Horsch or Stier command car was effectively cut off, unable to influence the battle. An American commander hopping into his readily available jeep could maintain a fluid personal presence on the front lines. This ability to move commanders rapidly to critical points fostered a more agile and adaptive command style, directly contrasting with the often more rigid, static German approach. The jeep's reliable start facilitated faster decision-making cycles, a critical advantage in fluid warfare. Artillery observation provides another stark example. Forward observers responsible for directing devastating artillery barrages needed to move quickly to vantage points, often under fire, and then displace rapidly to avoid counter-battery fire. Their lives depended on mobility. While the Germans often used specialized half-tracks or motorcycles like the Kettenkrad for this role, these vehicles had their own maintenance challenges. American artillery observers frequently used standard jeeps, modified to carry radios and mapping equipment. The jeep's ability to start instantly and navigate rough terrain allowed observers to keep pace with the advance, delivering accurate, timely fire support that often proved decisive. A stalled observer vehicle meant silenced guns. A running jeep meant continuous, devastating fire on the enemy. Even medical evacuation was impacted. While dedicated ambulances were the primary means of transport, jeeps equipped with litter carriers were ubiquitous for evacuating wounded from forward positions inaccessible to larger vehicles. In the critical golden hour after injury, the speed of evacuation often determined survival. A jeep that started immediately could shave precious minutes off that time, increasing the chances of saving a soldier's life. A German motorcycle sidecar or Kubelwagen struggling to start in the cold or mud could mean the difference between life and death for the wounded man waiting for evacuation. German technical intelligence, focused on analyzing captured Allied heavy equipment like tanks and aircraft, often paid less attention to the mundane details of the jeep's electrical system. They saw the 6-volt system and the simple distributor as evidence of American technological backwardness compared to their own more sophisticated designs. They failed to appreciate that this backwardness was a deliberate choice, prioritizing mass-producible reliability over niche performance. They underestimated the strategic impact of 1 million vehicles that simply worked, day after day, in every conceivable condition. While their own mechanically complex vehicles required constant, specialized attention, the American Army was flooding the battlefield with machines designed for minimal maintenance and maximum operational uptime. The simple start was a reflection of an entire industrial philosophy that valued availability over complexity, a philosophy that was steadily overwhelming German engineering pride through sheer, relentless functionality. The simple, reliable start was only the beginning of the Jeep's advantage. Its entire design philosophy, rooted in American automotive mass production, extended to ease of maintenance and repair, creating a logistical superiority that the German military, with its complex and often specialized vehicles, could simply not match. The difference wasn't just in starting the engine, it was in keeping it running with minimal effort under the brutal conditions of sustained warfare. The German approach to military vehicle maintenance often reflected their broader engineering culture. Precision required precision. Repairing a sophisticated German engine, transmission, or electrical system frequently demanded specialized tools, highly trained technicians, Feldmechaniker, and access to a clean, well-equipped workshop, luxuries rarely available near the rapidly shifting front lines. Components were often designed with tight tolerances and complex interdependencies, meaning a failure in one small part could necessitate a major disassembly, or require unique replacement parts that were difficult to source. This reliance on specialization created critical bottlenecks. If the designated engine specialist was unavailable or the specific required wrench was missing, a vehicle could remain deadlined for days or weeks, even for relatively minor issues. The American Jeep, conversely, was designed with the assumption that repairs would be conducted in the field by ordinary soldiers with basic training, using common tools. The engine bay was relatively open and accessible. Key components like the distributor, carburetor, generator, and starter motor were positioned for easy removal and replacement. The use of standardized SAE bolts and nuts meant that a basic GI toolkit could handle most common repairs, unlike the mix of metric and sometimes proprietary fasteners found on German vehicles. The TM9803 technical manual for the Willys MB Jeep became a legend in itself, a clear, concise guide filled with detailed illustrations that allowed soldiers with minimal mechanical aptitude to diagnose problems and perform basic maintenance. It reflected the American belief that the user should be empowered to keep the machine running rather than relying solely on a specialized support echelon. This philosophy of operator-level maintenance was a direct product of the American civilian experience, where car owners were accustomed to performing basic upkeep themselves. The simplicity extended to the components themselves. The Jeep's L-head engine, while not technologically advanced, was incredibly robust and forgiving. Its side valve design was simple to manufacture and repair. The electrical system, built from common automotive parts, meant that mechanics could often cannibalize components from knocked-out civilian vehicles or even other Allied military trucks if specific Jeep parts were unavailable. A starter motor from a Dodge truck might be jury-rigged to fit, or a coil from a captured French car adapted. This level of field improvisation, encouraged by the use of standardized components, was far more difficult with the specialized, often unique parts used in German military vehicles. Consider the simple act of replacing a failed generator. On a Jeep, this was typically a straightforward one-hour job involving a few bolts and electrical connections. On some German vehicles, accessing and replacing the generator might require partial engine disassembly or specialized lifting equipment, turning a simple component failure into a major repair headache. This difference in mean time to repair, MTTR, had a massive strategic impact. American units could return disabled Jeeps to service significantly faster than German units could repair their equivalent light vehicles. This meant higher overall availability rates and a more resilient logistical and operational backbone. While German units saw their effective vehicle strength steadily degrade due to combat losses and maintenance downtime, American units could absorb losses more effectively, knowing that damaged vehicles could be rapidly repaired or easily replaced due to mass production. German technical reports analyzing captured Jeeps often noted the crude finish, the loose tolerances, and the unimaginative use of standard automotive components. They saw a lack of engineering finesse. What they failed to see was a design deliberately optimized for reliability, mass production, and, above all, repairability by ordinary soldiers under the worst possible conditions. The Jeep wasn't just easy to start, it was easy to keep running. This mechanic's advantage, built into the very design philosophy of the vehicle, was another quiet, unglamorous factor, contributing to the relentless mobility of the Allied armies. The cumulative effect of the Jeep's simple start and easy maintenance wasn't just tactical convenience. It became a genuine strategic weapon. The sheer, relentless availability of hundreds of thousands of these small, rugged vehicles fundamentally shaped the way the American army fought and supplied itself, creating a level of operational tempo that the German military, hampered by its more complex and temperamental machinery, struggled to counter. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle, it was the engine of American mobility. Consider the Battle of Normandy and the subsequent breakout. The success of the campaign relied on speed and continuous pressure. The Jeep played an indispensable role in maintaining this momentum. Command vehicles ferried officers between rapidly advancing units. Reconnaissance patrols constantly probed German defenses. Artillery observers leapfrogged forward to keep fire support aligned with the leading elements. Communication lines were laid and repaired at breakneck speed. Medical evacuation chains stretched back from the front lines. All of these critical functions depended on light, reliable transport that could handle the damaged roads and rough terrain. The Jeep's ability to consistently start, run, and be quickly repaired ensured that these vital links remained unbroken even amidst the chaos. While German command structures often faltered due to stalled vehicles or communication breakdowns, the American operational nervous system, lubricated by the ever-present Jeep, kept functioning. German intelligence reports consistently underestimated the strategic impact of the Jeep, often dismissing it as a mere light utility vehicle, inferior in protection and payload to their own specialized designs. They saw its ubiquity but failed to grasp how its reliability multiplied its effectiveness. A German commander might have access to a technically superior Horsch heavy command car, but if that car was deadlined for repairs, it was strategically useless. An American commander, relying on a rotation of several simple Jeeps, always had reliable transport available. The German focus on peak performance blinded them to the strategic power of consistent availability. The numbers alone were staggering. The U.S. produced over 640,000 Jeeps during the war. This colossal figure meant that Jeeps were not treated as precious assets, but as expendable tools. If a Jeep was severely damaged or became hopelessly stuck, it was often simply abandoned, stripped for parts, and replaced by another one arriving in the next supply convoy. This disposable approach, horrifying to the resource-conscious Germans, allowed American units to maintain their mobility even when suffering significant vehicle losses. A German unit losing several Kubelwagens might face a critical transport shortage. An American unit losing the same number of Jeeps would barely notice the interruption. This constant availability fostered a culture of tactical improvisation. Jeeps were modified in the field for countless roles: mounting machine guns for fire support, carrying stretchers for medical evacuation, acting as mobile radio platforms, even serving as makeshift prime movers for light anti-tank guns. This adaptability stemmed directly from the vehicle's inherent reliability and simplicity. Soldiers trusted the Jeep to work, which encouraged them to experiment and push its capabilities beyond its original design specifications. German vehicles, often requiring more specialized care, offered less scope for such field modifications. Even in logistical roles, the Jeep's reliability paid dividends. While heavy GMC trucks carried the bulk supplies, Jeeps were essential for last-mile distribution, ferrying critical items like ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies from rear depots directly to frontline positions, often over terrain inaccessible to larger vehicles. A stalled supply truck created a major bottleneck. A stalled Jeep was a minor inconvenience, quickly bypassed or replaced. The cumulative effect of thousands of reliable Jeeps ensuring that vital supplies reached the front lines consistently cannot be overstated. The German command structure, witnessing the seemingly endless tide of American vehicles, often attributed Allied success solely to overwhelming material superiority. They saw the quantity but missed the critical qualitative advantage conferred by simple, reliable design. It wasn't just that the Americans had more vehicles, it was that their basic vehicles worked more consistently and required less maintenance effort, freeing up resources and manpower for direct combat operations. The simple, reliable spark generated by the Jeep's unassuming ignition system was, in its own small way, helping to power the entire Allied drive towards Berlin. The legacy of the Willys Jeep extends far beyond its iconic silhouette or its undeniable contribution to Allied victory. It stands as a powerful testament to a specific, uniquely American engineering philosophy, the belief that simplicity, reliability, and mass producibility are the ultimate strategic virtues, often outweighing theoretical perfection or peak performance. The simple, almost mundane electrical and ignition system of the Jeep encapsulates this philosophy perfectly. German engineering throughout the war produced undeniable masterpieces of complexity and power. The Tiger tank, the Me-262 jet fighter, the V-2 rocket. These were triumphs of technical prowess, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. Yet this very pursuit of perfection often carried the seeds of its own defeat. These complex machines were difficult and expensive to manufacture, demanding scarce resources and highly skilled labor. More critically, they were often fragile, requiring meticulous maintenance and specialized support systems that simply could not keep pace with the brutal realities of industrialized warfare. The German approach created brilliant, but often unavailable weapons. The American Jeep represented the antithesis. It was not the fastest, the most powerful, or the most technologically advanced vehicle on the battlefield. It was deliberately designed to be good enough across a wide range of tasks, and above all, to be utterly dependable and easily fixable. The simple 6-volt electrical system, the standard automotive distributor ignition, the robust wiring, these were not compromises made out of ignorance, they were deliberate choices made by engineers who understood that availability is the ultimate force multiplier. The simple start of the Jeep was more than just a convenience, it was a strategic enabler. It guaranteed mobility for reconnaissance, command, communication, and supply units under conditions that often left more complex German vehicles stalled. It minimized maintenance downtime, freeing up mechanics and resources for more critical tasks. It fostered a culture of adaptability and field improvisation among ordinary soldiers. The cumulative impact of having over 500,000 vehicles that just worked, consistently, across every theater and every climate, provided the American military with a relentless operational tempo that the German war machine, despite its pockets of technological brilliance, could not sustain. Post-war analysis confirmed the wisdom of this approach. While German engineers might have rightfully criticized the Jeep's lack of sophistication, they could not argue with its unparalleled record of reliability and its impact on Allied mobility. The lessons learned from the Jeep's design, particularly its emphasis on standardized components, ease of maintenance, and robust simplicity, influenced military vehicle development worldwide for decades. The final verdict is clear. The intricate, high-performance German engines, often paralyzed by cold or demanding specialized care, represented a philosophy of engineering artistry. The simple, reliable ignition system of the American Jeep, born from the pragmatic demands of the civilian car market, represented a philosophy of industrialized function. In the grinding, attritional conflict of World War II, function decisively defeated artistry. The spark that reliably brought the Jeep's humble engine to life, day after day, in mud, snow, and sand, was the quiet, unassuming spark that helped power the Allied victory.